Joining us now, Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch. Tom, great to see you. It's just extraordinary that the FBI can make stuff up and get a FISA warrant on the basis of this made-up stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Alice in Wonderland. Denying misconduct is evidence of misconduct. Yeah. That's the way the Obama FBI operated. And as best I can tell, institutionally, they haven't changed their approach.
Well, meanwhile, Hunter Biden, what do you make of the fact that it reached his book, which hasn't come out yet, but the advanced orders are now #1 in a category called Chinese biographies? What do you make of that?
Well, maybe his business partners are buying the book. But the book supposedly is about his addiction issues, but we know it's not about the addiction issue. That's not why he's putting the book out. He's putting the book out to soften his image as he faces, and his father faces, this criminal investigation into his activities.
It's really extraordinary how some of these things work out. Sometimes fate emerges in ways that we can never imagine. Meanwhile, you have this Time magazine article, which I think got it largely right, I think for the wrong reasons, but it got it right about the collusion between big business, the Chamber of Commerce, those kind of big corporations, and left-wing activists in order to prevent a Trump re-election. And I want to just quote from the article. It says, in a way, Trump was right. They, meaning this collusion, if you will, between big business and left-wing activists, fended off voter suppression lawsuits. They recruited armies of poll workers and got millions of people to vote by mail for the first time. They successfully pressured social media companies to take a harder line against what they call disinformation and used data-driven strategies to fight viral smears. So they're admitting that Trump was right in suggesting that this collusion existed.
Yeah, we've been calling attention to this issue for well over a year. They used COVID as a pretext, as the article says, to change the rules, change the systems. And they used big tech to censor criticism of that and concerns of it. And when push came to shove and the disputes got heated in terms of the legal fights, you had big tech cooperating with the U.S. Chamber and big businesses to say no one's allowed to question how the elections were run. And what I think is really interesting about this article, David, is that it's pretty clear that the protesters, some of which were violent before the election from the left, clearly were operating at the beck and call of this conspiracy, or this cabal, as the article calls it, because they were able to turn the protests on and off with a spigot. And we know from prior reporting that the left was planning protests. They were planning, according to the New York Times, to push a threat of secession from the Union by certain states if Trump was actually getting traction in the Electoral College, and Tom, to get their slates pointed.
You have to wonder whether big business was aware of this, pre-planning that was being done by a lot of these left-wing activists.
Well, were voters aware of this? Were voters aware that this activity was taking place, that the changes in our election laws that resulted in unprecedented mail-in balloting was the result of activities behind the scenes between corporations that were censoring complaints about that, namely Facebook, Twitter, the unions, the Chamber of Commerce.
According to Time magazine, no right-wing journal, in fact, very favorable to the left-wing causes, that's exactly what they had in mind. That's why all these changes, some of which seem pretty unconstitutional when you look at what happened in Pennsylvania, for example, that's why they took place, because they were being encouraged by this alliance. Finally, I got to ask something about New York Times, because they, too, are looking back with some question about what happened, particularly with regard to the data that was collected through apps that may have been on the phones of a lot of the people that were at the January 6th rally and then the riots that took place in the Capitol. The New York Times, again, saying that the data collected on January 6th is a demonstration of the looming threat to our liberties posed by a surveillance economy that monetizes the movements of the righteous and the wicked alike. Now, we may have differences of opinion about who was wicked or not, but even the New York Times now is admitting that this is a danger.
Well, as they actually report the data and on specific individuals and use the data that was illegally leaked to them by someone who had access to this data from big tech or one of the major cell phone operators. I don't know. Who leaked this data to the New York Times? Your private location data, if you're of the wrong political class, will be targeted and potentially leaked illegally and get published in the New York Times. I tell you what, going back to this Time magazine article, that's Exhibit A for President Trump next week.
Absolutely.
He's being impeached and tried for alleging the same concerns that Time is confirming. And now we have the New York Times collaborating with big tech to publish private information about citizens, accusing them of crimes just in the papers in a major news publication without much basis other than suspicious leaks.
All right, we got to leave it at that, but there's a lot
the targeting
more
of Trump. It was never about Trump. We see it's now about everyone.
There's a lot more, as you suggest, is going to be coming out very shortly about all this, about everything that happened. If they thought they could keep all this secret, they were wrong. Tom Fitton, thank you very much, Tom.